Welcome to Cedar's Compass, where we explore the dynamic interplay between our inner landscape and our planet's ecology. Delve deep into the worlds of science, medicine, and philosophy as we discover the threads that weave us into the larger tapestry of life on Earth. The metal element as represented in the ecology, in the environment around us, it's seasonally the time of year that we're in right now, autumn. Right? And this is the metal time. It's also represented by the mountains, geologically. Mountains are concentrations of metal, the metal element being very strong there, rock, but then also down to mineral, right? And we shape metal into what we make like steel and iron, and then we use that metal to actually carve and cut the world. You know, we cut and carve wood, right? We saw, we axe, we chop wood to control it. And this is really interesting because wood is growth and outward expression, and metal is refinement, control, consolidation, right? Well, in the ecosystem, the mountains at that peak point where the rock, the mineral, the magnetic material is concentrated, that's a point where there is no wood. Wood has fallen away at the height of the mountain. That's where the tree line ends. And this is how metal in the five-element theory, five-element system actually controls wood. So wood can't even get to that top point. And at that top point in our ecosystem, the mountain, as its magnetic pull works in the sky and in the heavens, it draws to it water. And really it draws to it water in the form of clouds, right? Where it's like concentrating the clouds. The water is actually gathering and gathering. And if you'll see, like we live close to Mount Shasta here. It's one of the southern Cascade Mountains, a beautiful 14,000 foot peak that, you know, I've spent many times climbing up the sides of and getting close to the peak of. It's a magical place. But right there, if you're looking at that mountain, you almost always will see wisps of clouds or certain kind of cloud formations, big clouds that look like, you know, the kind of flying saucer type of things. And then you'll see it, the whole peak gets shrouded in this thick cloud layer. It's pulling the clouds in, and then the clouds dump the water onto the mountain, into the rock, right, into the bed. And what does that water do? Well, it falls down and it starts to create paths, right? Water is a solvent, a universal solvent. It starts to dissolve the metal slowly and breaking it down until you have little streams and riverways where the water is now being distributed through the metal out into the land down below, where then that water creates growth, right? Growth of what? Growth of more wood, more growing life, and then that feeds all the animals and everything else from there. But that's part of what's called the generating cycle, where you say that, you know, at this point in the cycle, metal generates water, water generates wood. And of course, as the summer comes, and around here we see the storms come in, we get the lightning, you know, this magical, amazing earth energy that creates fire from the wood, that then burns up the wood and then creates new earth. And then the earth then, of course, settles down and goes through its process of concentration to become metal. And then that cycle starts over again. And there's lots and lots of layers and lots of ways to bring these metaphors through. And I just wanted to give a little bit of an overview on the five elements, you know, before we go deeper into what the metal element is. But if you understand that basic relationship where metal as rock, as mountain, as water, clouds, and then distribution, then you can easily overlay that on the human body, where we have the lungs and then the large intestine as our metal element organ networks. And this is what is in Chinese medicine called elemental endocrinology. That's what I call it. It's the secreting glands, those organs that work together and relate to the elements in our seasons, in our environment around us. And so the lung organ, as a metal organ, is very much like the mountains. It literally in our bodies is the topmost point of all the organs. It sits right at the top, right? It's just like the peak of the mountain. And what does it do? Well, in traditional Chinese medical thought, the lungs are basically distributors of water. They collect the water in our bodies, the fluid, and then they distribute the fluid down the kind of, just like we were talking about, these little riverways, right? All down through. So it's distributing water throughout the body. And there's a really deep relationship between the lung and the kidney in Chinese medicine, right? They're both very important because the kidney is really this source of water, and it's this place where the water is held. You know, the bladder is like, you know, this literally like a bladder of water that holds the fluid before we release it. Well, going up is the kidney. The kidney and this relationship with the lung is that the kidney brings the energy and the fire to vaporize the water, move it up to the top of the system where the lungs then collect it like the mountains and the water and then distribute it down through all the pathways. And if you actually look at the relationship between the lung and the cardiovascular system, you see how directly the fluid relationship is between the lungs and then the blood and then that distribution throughout the whole body, right? That's very, very direct. If you've ever seen a human body where they've actually like removed the parenchyma, like the actual structure of the organ, what's left is just an incredibly complex web of blood vessels. So it's this waterway, this distribution way for blood and fluids. And when I look at the lung as an organ in its relationship to the large intestine, there's this really deep connection where we're drawing in air, right, from our environment. And remember, we can go, maybe days without water. We can go a little bit more than that without sleep. We can go weeks without food. Might not be comfortable, but we can do it. But with our breath, we can only go several minutes before death. Our mortality is imminent, right? So it's very, very close to what we call our animal spirit, the Po spirit, the animal part of us. That's the part that we have to like give back at the end of our life. It's born of the materials of the earth. This is the spirit that's housed in the lungs. And so when we're at this time of year, the metal element, we feel that proximity to death, that relationship between breath and mortality. And each breath we take, we are connecting ourselves to life, right? And so this relationship to the large intestine is such that when we're done with what we've used in life, we have to package it and release it. And so there's this big part of the metal element which is deciding. I always think of the katana like as a blade, right? We shape the metal into this incredibly refined blade that is actually used as a tool by people like the samurai who devote their life to its actual control, to use the refined, the pure, the righteous, to hold the metal and make the clear slice, right, when it's time to alter the course of things. And so that level of us using metal to decide what we're gonna ultimately let go of, that's really that large intestine connection. And every organ network has a yin secreting part and then a yang holding and excreting part. So the lungs are this, they hold the yin, this material, they're rich in blood. And imagine, every time you breathe in that air, right, what do? You have all this blood flowing through the lungs that then is full of what? Metal, right? It's got iron in it. And the iron has the magnetic pull that pulls on the oxygen and connects it to the hemoglobin molecule in the blood. And then that all just goes distributing as the heart is moving through its electromagnetic pulses, the blood all through the body to connect that fluid everywhere, enrich everything, keep it moist and juicy. And the extent of that is the skin. The lung really has a deep, close relationship with the skin. And when this time of year, at autumn, with the metal element, where everything is susceptible to being dry, right? Because you just had the long summer, you had the late summer, you dried up the fluids, the streams are low, the ground is hard, right? The vegetation is crispy. That's what's happening all around us, and it's in our bodies that way too. And so it's at that time that we start to feel this skin relationship where the skin starts to get dry. And interestingly enough is that at that level in Chinese medicine, we have something called the Wei Qi, or the defensive qi of the body. It's like the immune system, but it's this outer layer of it that keeps us protected from the ecological pressures that would overwhelm us and lead to us getting sick. This is how respiratory illness directly links to our immune system or lack thereof and our susceptibility to it. There's a connection really deeply between the strength of a pathogen, whether it's too much heat, too much cold, too much damp, or you get literally too much of an actual microbe in your face and you take in too much of it, where your body can't meet it and overcome it, right? Adapt and then hold itself. Then there's a breakdown and we get sick. Well, the lung controls the outer layer, the Wei Qi, our defensive outward expression. Well, there you have it. There's a little bit on the autumn relationship with the metal element, the lungs, the large intestine. Thanks for being here.